Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel has no choice but to finish the job and complete the defeat of Hamas. Speaking to foreign media in Jerusalem, he defended the planned military offensive, saying Israel's goal is to, quote, free Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister added that there's a short timetable in mind for the next few steps. Jenny Shin has a recap of what he said.
Amid growing calls to end the war, Benjamin Netanyahu remained defiant on his new plan to take control of Gaza City.
Our goal is not to occupy Gaza. Our goal is to free Gaza, free it from Hamas terrorists. The war can end tomorrow if Gaza, or rather if Hamas lays down its arms and releases all the remaining hostages.
Speaking at a press conference in Jerusalem, the Israeli Prime Minister said operations will be carried out quickly and safe zones will be established first. The aim of the new offensive, to dismantle what he called the last remaining Hamas strongholds.
Given Hamas's refusal to lay down its arms, Israel has no choice but to finish the job and complete the defeat of Hamas. Last Thursday, Israel's Security Cabinet, instructed the IDF to dismantle the 2 remaining Hamas strongholds in Gaza City and the central camps.
Netanyahu says Israel plans to open safe corridors to evacuate targeted areas and establish new aid sites in Gaza. For now, the amount of aid entering the enclave remains limited due to an Israeli blockade, with its distribution marred by injuries and killing, either from Israeli fire or falling pallets. As starvation grips the enclave, the Israeli government has faced growing international criticism. On Sunday, the UN Security Council slammed Netanyahu's plan to expand military operations, calling on his cabinet to reverse the decision.
The latest decision by the government of Israel risks igniting another horrific chapter in this conflict, with potential consequences beyond Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. If these plans are implemented, they will likely trigger another calamity in Gaza, reverberating across the region.
Netanyahu also faces mounting criticism at home, with tens of thousands rallying in Tel Aviv regularly to demand an end to the war.
For more on this story of the planned Israeli taking of control of Gaza, I can welcome Oliver McTernan, director and co-founder of Forward Thinking, a charity addressing issues related to the Middle East peace process and religious and secular dialogue. Good morning, Oliver, and thank you for joining us. Is this plan of Benjamin Netanyahu's for defeating Hamas, is it a new departure or is it more of the same?
No, I think, Oliver, it's from the very beginning. It was his intention. He said, remember, in October 23, that he had a twofold goal. One was to see the total demise of Hamas, and the second was to rescue the hostages. What this plan has done, he's put a bit more, what we would say, political vision onto the end of what happens if he achieves his first goal, defeating Hamas. And he's telling us he's going to separate Gaza from the rest of the occupied Palestinian territories, impose his own sort of leadership in Gaza, and then hopefully get support for security from some of the Arab countries. Well, I think right from the start, it's not going to work. And all it's going to do is to lead to more killing. Gaza has become the modern killing fields, and I fear we're going to see more of that if he attempts to implement this plan he presented.
Now, Netanyahu is facing pressure from some in Israeli civil society, particularly the families of hostages, to bring the war to an end. But there's also pressure from the other end, particularly from far-right members of his own government, who say he's not going far enough with these plans. Will he actually survive this internal dissent within the government?
I think it would be a very unwise person who would bet on whether Netanyahu will survive politically or not. He's a past master at being able to manipulate situations and come out of it in his favor. I think the problem with the street protests in the Israeli political setting, they don't seem to have much impact. I think the real issue is what's going on in the Knesset, even though it is in recess. You may recall just before they went into the summer recess, the 2 major ultra-Orthodox parties, Shas and the United Judaism or Torah Judaism parties pulled out of government, leaving Netanyahu in a minority government. Now, he is to use this recess to work with those parties, I think, to get them back into his coalition. And the issue is over the draft law that students in the religious schools are exempt from military service. Now, there's been a strong reaction from other parties on that. I think if he fails to get them back in between now and October, what's going to happen is he's going to have elections. Meanwhile, he's placating Smotrich and Ben-Gvir by pursuing what they wanted from the start, the devastation of Gaza and, in fact, the deportation of the whole Palestinian population of Gaza. So he's playing political games. I don't think it's anything to do with Israel's present security or future security.
Now, Netanyahu's troubles with the law are well documented. The very fact that if he leaves office, he is likely to face prosecution on corruption charges. But we're also beginning to see signs of serious dissent against the war within Israel, with scholars of genocide such as Omer Bertov and Amos Goldberg, and also the novelist David Grossman, saying that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. So Israel is unlikely to ever cooperate with the International Criminal Court, but might this actually be added to a slate of offences against Netanyahu within Israel in the future?
Yeah, I have many friends in Israel who are extremely distressed, and I use that word, by what is happening now in Gaza. And they would put it in that category. You know, they would feel that the consequences of what is going on now will be felt for some time to come. I think one of the issues, as you rightly point out, is how this will be dealt with in the context of international law. But my worry, Oliver, is that we have seen the whole post-war rule-based order just disintegrate before our eyes in the last 22 months. Certainly, the Geneva Convention has not been applied to Gaza. Gaza, as we constantly need to be reminded, is already an occupied territory in international law. And Israel, under the Geneva Convention, had a responsibility to protect civilians, to provide them food, to ensure their medical needs are met, and so on. We've seen that just totally ignored. So on the international level, in the law context, I think the jury is out. But I think the relationship between Israel and its neighbors, I've just come back from Cairo last week, the neighboring attitude among the populations, I think it will take a long, long time to heal that, and for Israel to feel that it is part of the region, which it should be. If we're going to have lasting peace and security, it has to be an integral part of a sustainable stability in the region. As the way Netanyahu is driving the country at the moment and what's happening in Gaza, I think is making that extremely, extremely a difficult scenario to see how it will be implemented.
Now, even Washington has begun to show some impatience with Netanyahu, with Donald Trump clashing with him over images of starvation from Gaza. Will Trump exert any significant pressure on Netanyahu?
It's another unwise person who would predict that, because the one thing we know about Donald Trump is his unpredictability. It's interesting, Haaretz yesterday had a headline saying that Trump has done nothing to ease the starvation crisis in Gaza. Now, I would say that would have been a first indicator. He expressed his alarm at the pictures he saw. He said those can't be fakes. And yet we've seen him do very, very little to change the circumstances, to insist that Netanyahu allows sufficient food into Gaza. We're hearing an alternative narrative constantly coming out of Jerusalem that is challenging all the realities on the ground.
Thank you very much for that, Oliver McTernan, Director and Co-founder of Forward Thinking.